As he fought, memories of his past flooded his mind. He remembered how hard he had worked to obtain the highest level of graduator aura in his previous life, but he couldn't learn a suitable sword technique, and only met with hostility from the people of the direct bloodline because he was an illegitimate child, and that was also the reason why he could not go beyond the 5th technique. But this time, Bichir was determined not to let his past hold him back. He attacked the statue with all his might, channeling his anger and frustration into his sword strikes. In the midst of his attacks, Bichir's thoughts turned defiant. With a vivid image of Hugo's face on the statue in front of him, he unleashed his technique, cutting through the statue with precision. Bichir breathed heavily and wondered if he was able to execute the 5th technique. He clenched his hands and smiled as he felt a hot sensation rise from his heart to his neck. He was overwhelmed with happiness to the point that he could cry. Suddenly, he realized that he needed a sword to test his newly learned technique. At that moment, at a record-breaking speed in Baskerville's history, a young hound's canine teeth started to grow that were bared towards its master. Bichir beamed with pride, his body still trembling with excitement from his success in drawing the 5th tooth. He couldn't believe how far he had come, and how quickly he had managed to do it. He marveled at the strength of his mana, now able to support him at a level he had only achieved after years of hard work in his previous life. As he looked at the liquid aura flowing within him, a sign of his newfound status as a graduator, he couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. Graduators were on a completely different level from sword experts, and he was now one of them. It was a point that had taken him 30 years to reach in his previous life, and yet here he was, only 8 years old. The solid aura within him had transformed into a liquid state, with increased density that allowed him to use it more freely. Bichir felt confident about his new skills and abilities, and he knew that he could achieve much more. He was determined to master the lurking ambush sword technique and use it to its full potential. He realized that with this technique, he could smoothly transition between offense and defense, making it the perfect technique with no limitations. Bichir carefully placed the book near the window and took a moment to reflect on his progress. He knew that he had come a long way since his regression, and he was now stronger and more skilled than ever before. He felt that he could challenge a mid-class graduator if he put his mind to it, and he was confident that he could win using his new skills. However, Bichir also knew that he couldn't reveal too much of his strength to Hugo. He needed to give Hugo something to look forward to, so he had enough time to take everything he needed. Bichir took out a magnifying lens and placed it carefully near the book. The sun's rays converged onto the pages of the book through the lens, and a little fire started burning it. With an evil grin, Bichir commented that the destruction of the book would make it difficult for Hugo and the Hounds to reach the 10th technique, although Bichir himself would have no such difficulty. Suddenly, the guards, who had been nowhere to be seen, arrived in the library. The smell of burning paper had caught their attention. They were startled to see Bichir there and demanded to know what had happened. Bichir's expression quickly changed to one of apology, and he explained that he had accidentally left the magnifying glass around, which had caused the fire. He offered to inform the butlers of the incident. The guards knew that they could be punished heavily for this, and after a brief pause, one of them spoke up that this was not something that he needed to apologize for. It was their fault for not looking after him properly, and they were just glad that this was an area with only useless books. Bichir asked if they were busy with the Moore clan regarding the ruby mines. He thought they wouldn't have time to deal with small problems like this, especially since they weren't even there to begin with. The guards agreed to keep it a secret, as long as Bichir was willing to do the same. As he started walking away, Bichir suggested they keep the incident between themselves, and he apologized for taking up their time. As Bichir walked away, the guards spoke to each other about how nice and considerate he was towards the workers. They believed he deserved to be respected. Little did they know, Bichir had a mischievous grin on his face as he left them behind. As Bichir stood in Hugo's office, Hugo asked him if he had learned something enlightening in the library. Bichir responded that he had learned of something warm and sharp, yet soft and viscous. This statement shocked both Hugo and the head butler, who realized that Bichir might have achieved the aura. Aura was a sign of officially entering the world of the sword. Even geniuses must train without rest until the age of 15 to reach the level of low-class sword expert. Hugo was excited but then realized that Bichir was only 8 years old and denied the thought of Bichir reaching that level. He then asked Bichir if he could show his father what he had learned, to which Bichir responded affirmatively. In the Colosseum-like structure, Bichir stood with a sword in his hand as many young hounds watched with confused looks on their faces. Head butler asked Hugo how he planned on testing Bichir's skills, to which Hugo replied that he was going to release a monster for Bichir to deal with. Head butler was shocked at the idea of releasing a monster, and Hugo confirmed that he had prepared a hungry and feisty one. The gate in front of Bichir opened and a guard brought in the chained orc. The orc was a massive, green-skinned creature with bulging muscles and razor-sharp tusks protruding from its mouth. Its beady eyes darted around the Colosseum, sizing up its opponents. The young hounds in the audience looked on in shock and awe at the sight of the fearsome creature. Some whispered to each other in disbelief, questioning whether it was really necessary to send an orc to face an 8-year-old. They wondered if the Guardian Knights would have to intervene if things got out of hand. Despite the audience's doubts, Bichir remained calm and collected, ready to face the orc with his sword. Hugo gave permission and the guard opened the orc's chains. The orc let out a loud roar and charged towards Bichir. However, Bichir remained calm and waited for the right moment to strike.